Let me just say hi, everybody. Welcome back. So we are in chapter 21, Parsha Mishpatim of Exodus. But what we're going to deal with is the last few words of the previous chapter, chapter 20, actually verses 21 through 23. And we're really going to focus on these two words, Ve'elu HaMishpatim. And we're going to involve ourselves with a little bit of didactics, the 13 hermeneutical principles, the exegesis principles of learning. I love that. I love that. I love it. That's how it's pronounced.
Preaching over there.
But it's with a G, not a J.
10 points.
We're going to deal with some real logical ideas. We're going to learn a lot of like pshat and drush. That means the simple meaning, expounding upon it. And what we call kal v'chomer. Kal v'chomer means...
More to 40.
It's a very... how do you say it?
More to 40.
More to 40. Al-Furturi.
Just say what it is. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, I actually gave you a couple, what's the word? Links in number 3. He actually calls it what? He doesn't say. But inside those links, they talk about that word. Okay. So, the famous question many of the Parshiot start off with is, why is this Parsha connected with the last week's Parsha? What exactly? And I'm going to tell you, all that Rashi says, one of the main things that Rashi says is, besides pointing out there's a Vav, and he says something about the Vav, which I'll skip for now. Now, why was the section dealing with the laws juxtaposed to the section dealing with the altar? In other words, we're in source sheet 1, and if you look back at 21, verse 21 in chapter 20, yeah, you have a Mizbech Adamah. There's a command to build an altar of earth, and you're going to slaughter next to it, V'nizbach olav, the different types of korbanot, and a very nice blessing comes from Hashem. And when you make them, number 1, they shouldn't use metal. You don't use metal to carve it out. And it has to be natural or through a certain worm. And you don't ascend steps. It should be built as a ramp. No steps. It's built as a ramp. Why? In order that the nakedness of the Kohen who's ascending the ramp is not seen by the stones that are underneath it. Now, why I'm going to give you some ideas now, but we're going to see it inside. What it sounds like is that we have to be concerned about inanimate objects. Why does it have to use a non-metal or non-iron object to shape the stones? What do we care? The stones are inanimate objects. They have feelings. And the stones are ashamed by looking up at the nakedness. Remember, the Kohen, he's wearing this gown, so to speak, a robe.
Pants.
Huh?
Also pants.
That you could see underneath it. So there's some kind of nakedness. If there were steps, so what? Well, let's see. Steps would what? Uncover it? I mean, this makes any sense? And then there's a Vav, Ve'elu HaMishpatim, and these are the Mishpatim. So now we're going to see the real Rashi that we wanted to focus in on. And that is in 1, it's highlighted. Now, why is this section dealing with laws juxtaposed to the section dealing with the altar? In other words, Mishpatim, the word Mishpatim means laws. And this whole Parsha is chock full of tort laws and civil laws. And they're all beautiful. But they're laws nevertheless. What did we have in last week's Parsha? The truth is we had the 10 Commandments, right? And we had already the building of this altar. But to tell you that the place, the Sanhedrin, that you should actually place the Sanhedrin, the place that the Sanhedrin sits is adjacent to the altar. the Beit HaMikdash. Some say the altar, but that's the concept. And that's going to be our focus for today. But not really. In other words, Rashi brings this one answer down. But the Medrash brings two additional answers, and Rashi doesn't bring them. So not only we're going to gain great insight into the other two answers that the Gemara brings, and we're going to try to figure out why Rashi didn't bring those two answers, and he only brought this. And it could be in the end that this answers the other two. But okay, I don't want to give too much away. While we're here, I do want to focus on the first part of that Rashi that we didn't really read. Wherever it says just the word Elah, remember it says Va'ela with the Vav. Vav, Aleph, Lamed, Hey. Whenever it says the word Elah without the Vav, so it separates whatever had been previously said. How many times have I told you, or your mother told you, never start a new sentence with the word and? We've heard this before. So it starts with the word and, but if it didn't say and, it just started with the word these, it comes to separate what had previously been said with what is now about to be said. But the fact that our Parsha says, and these, tells us what? That there's a connection. And what was said previously, which was the Ten Commandments, and where were they told over? At Mount Sinai. So too, all these laws of torts, all the details, all these mitzvahs that we were given in terms of how to run a society was given at Mount Sinai. Unbelievable, right? It's great stuff. Okay, so the Kliyakar only asked the question, why is, and he's quoting Rashi, why is the Parsha connected to last week's Parsha? In order to tell you that the Sanhedrin needs to be there. That's the place of the Sanhedrin, next to the altar. However, what Rashi did not explain is a famous Gemara. And this Gemara can be found in number 3. I'm skipping 2 for a second, because we'll get back to it. Oh, you know what? Let's just go through number 2 first. Just notice when we read number 3 that you'll see the word darash by the word bar kapara. That's the rabbi's name. Darash means that he expounded. It wasn't pashat pshat. It wasn't the most simple way to read the verse, but it was something added in the understanding. Whereas when it came to Rabbi Eliezer, it says Amar. He said, which means he's telling us what the pshat is. And he's explaining this verse in the Gemara. Well, actually, we'll see how he explains it. He first explains the principle. And where do you learn the principle? From this verse. And what verse are we expounding? In last week's Parsha, it says, you shall not ascend the steps upon my altar, so that your nakedness shall not be exposed upon it. Okay, so now turn to number 3, where you can see clearly it says, Darash bar kapara. He says, from where do we know this concept? The concept is, Havu matuni badin, that a judge needs to what? To be slow and deliberate in judgment. Now, what kind of judgment are we talking about? If he's judging a case, and the case is clearly the person is innocent, he should let the people know. You're acquitted, you're innocent, go home, enjoy your time with your wife, your kids, have a nice supper. But if the person is guilty, he needs to wait overnight. Now, obviously, if it's not like a major capital case, he doesn't have to wait overnight, but he shouldn't give the negative judgment right away. What if more witnesses come? What if it could be overturned? So in a capital case, for sure you're going to wait a whole nother day. And then in the next morning, you'll tell the guy, sorry, you're guilty, you have to die. But at least you were matuni medin. You didn't give over such a harsh punishment right away. And that's the most extreme case. We're going to have cases where people come to me or people come to other rabbis and ask questions. Well, I could show off, right? I could show my colors. I can answer them in a split second. Even before they even finish the question, I already know what they're going to ask. So that's going to be a question of haughtiness. It's going to be expression of haughtiness. So be matuni medin. Say, you know, even if it's the most simple question, let me get the book and see what the book has to say, you know, because then, but you know, I get the person to talk, number one, and you can actually find out a lot more things to help them answer their question. You have a question? Yeah.
No, I comment. Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, you know, bless his memory, he had a beautiful thing he said about this. He said that when he was a young rabbi, he used to give like everybody the same like judgment. Like if they had this problem, he'd give them this answer from the book. And he said the older he got, and the more mature he got, the more they were different. The more each person, like you're saying, each person, he would rule differently for them. And he said, like, by the time he retired, he was, like, basically ruling differently for everybody, because everybody's different. And
the situation is different.
Exactly. Right? Even though the laws are the same, the way they're applied in different situations are different.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Okay, and where is his proof? It says, do not ascend the steps, right, our verse, that you should be matunim bedin. And I'm just going to stop, look at Rashi when he says the ma'alot. When he goes, it says in Hebrew, in Rashi's script, going up the steps, b'chazaka u'b'merutza, strong and fast. When you go up steps, I don't know if you ever noticed it. I mean, people say, well, I have 52 steps with no elevator. It's my cheder kosher. It's my workout room. It's not my stair room. It's my workout room. We always think twice before we leave the house. But anyway, so when you go up steps, it's very different than going up a ramp. When you go up a ramp, apparently you go a little slower. When you go up steps, it's a little bit quicker. So that's all we understand so far, Rashi. And then he says, the next part is Amar Rebbe Eliezer. It's actually Rebbe Elazar, so, okay, not a typo, but long story. Minayin l'dayan shalo yipsaya al roshei am kodesh. From where do we know that a judge is not to trample or walk upon the heads of the holy nation? From our verse, he should not go up the steps to the altar. Okay, so we don't really understand what's going on here. We have someone who's making a drasha, and we have another rabbi who's giving us pshat, but we're going to go in depth. We're going to really, I don't know, it's called flesh it out. Flesh it out, tear it apart, eat it, chew it, consume it, really understand it, make a kinyan, acquire what God really wants us to know, because this is the manual for life. And we're only dealing with 2 words. These are the Mishpatim. The truth is we aren't, because we're going all over the place. As you see, you have at least 10 or 12 sources to other psukim, but okay. So now we're going to go to number 4. I think we're going to go back into the source. Okay. I want you to know that we're activating our brain cells. We're really going to think how these rabbis thought. Right? Isn't that what we want to do? We want to understand what God revealed at Mount Sinai. He revealed all of this for different people, different times, and all these lessons are to be learned and implemented into our life. But we have to know what they are. All we see is words that don't have the deepest of meanings, although I gave it some meaning, but we're going to see it might go much further, not from me, but from the Jewish tradition. I only helped interpret it. Okay, so basically the question that the Kliya Kar wants to know is how come you have the word darash by Rebbe, by Bar Kapara, and you have the word Amar, and okay, they're very different, but what's really going on here? Let me just go into the text. So I'll tell you where we are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 lines down. The last 2 words are v'harei dvarim kal v'chomer. He basically wants to understand, how did we understand that last point? I already told you the first point. You can see it in Rashi, that when you go up steps, you go fast. So going up a ramp, you're going slower. But what is this about walking on the heads of other people? So he says it's from Kal V'chomer, that just like stones, which are an inanimate object, They don't have any das. They don't have any brains. They don't have any feelings and emotions that you have to worry about shaming them. The Torah tells us, don't shame it. Don't ascend those steps to reveal the nakedness, or don't bring metal to the stone. If you're not supposed to behave like that to an inanimate object, so now consider your friend, meaning your brother, meaning another human being who's created in the image of the one who created you. How much more so should you be concerned about shaming that person? How much more so? It's called a kal v'chomer. It's a logical, if it's true by this, how much more so would it be true by that? I want to know if you guys are with me so far, because we haven't even begun to scratch the surface. Okay. So now he wants to really understand each point better. And I'll read it in Hebrew and translate it. It's the second paragraph. Now, if he's saying that it's pshat, meaning it's a simple meaning of the verse, he's going to tell us that the vav of va'ela is absolutely necessary as part of the pshat. It's not like a drush. It's actually pshat, right? Va'ela, your mother said never start a sentence with and. That and is actually part of the verse. I mean, part of the understanding. By connecting whatever was, in this case, after, is going to apply before. Well, what was before is going to apply after. It's going to be on both sides. It's called a vav ituf. Ituf means encompassing or enwrapped. So the vav is enwrapped with both sides. Like the word and, I don't know, sometimes there's an order. But anyway, you have the word and actually connects whatever came before the and with what comes after the and. So he says, without this juxtaposition, I would have only thought that we're only talking about who? Just a regular Kohen or a regular person, not a Dayan. Because what would I have thought? If I lived in America or I lived in Russia or one of these other countries, I would have thought that if you didn't have the rule of law, if you didn't have the fear of the judge, there would be anarchy and chaos. Maybe even here, right? That's a logical thought. So maybe it applies to everybody but the judge, right? Here come the judge. I think that was like a statement when we were growing up. Here come the judge. So, I don't know, the judge walks in, everyone stands up. You have to have fear of the whole system. So the judge represents the system. So without that, and then you might come to think what? That, let me just go through this again. So without the vav, without knowing that they're connected, I would have thought if I only read the first part, meaning about the Exodus chapter 20, verses 21 through 23, without the vav, ve'elu mishpatim, that this applies to the Kohen, right? He shouldn't put himself above, or anybody else shouldn't put himself above. Zedafka adam acher, sheinu dayan v'chashuv, who's not a judge or somebody important. He's the one who shouldn't walk on the heads of other people in a way that shames them. But when it comes to, this is all the mistaken thought, okay? But a dayan, he needs to put this awe and fear on the populace in order that they'll listen to what he has to say. So what would I have thought? That it's actually permissible, maybe even a mitzvah, for the judge to instill this fear by degrading everyone around him? No. Shematom, are you going to say the milos of the shofet is greater than the Kohen? So then you're going to end up saying that the judge is greater than the Kohen, and that is the logical conclusion? No, Kamash Malan, that's not what it means. The Torah is telling you no. How does a judge gain respect? By being an er l'chayid, by being a mensch, by being a decent human being. Right? I mean, who's going to elect? I mean, today I guess they have... They vote, and whoever pays the most amount, and maybe corrupt. This is the opposite. You become respected because of your deeds, because of the way you act towards other human beings.
Or you knock down someone, the better you are.
Oh, that's how it goes? You knock someone else down, you get on top. Is this lesson unbelievable? That says, these are the mishpatim, these are the laws you place before them. Who's them? The judges. They are obligated to keep what was before the vav, not to treat other people with disdain. Wow. And how do you know this? From the kal v'chomer of the stones, of the inanimate objects, as we said before. Wow. Okay. So we got that piece down. You guys ready for the next paragraph?
That's what they say about people, how to get up the steps, how to get upstairs, how to get up the ladder. There's two ways to get up. Somebody's down on the bottom of the ladder.
Yeah.
How do you get up the ladder? Either you step on him so you can get up in front of him, or you schlep him up with you.
Ah, schlep him up with you. You know, we say about Lashon Hara, well, the whole idea is, how do you want to get on top? The same way. You can speak Lashon Hara, or you can build yourself up. You can either be, grow, or push the other person down, right? Mm-hmm. And that's the easy way. Push the other person down, so then you're above him, right? But you didn't really get anywhere, in fact. Remember that, Lashon Hara, right? You heard of Lashon Hara? If anybody doesn't understand a word I'm saying, let me know. Okay, so now we're dealing with Bar Kapara. Remember what he said. He said that the judge, needs to be matun bedin. Matun bedin meaning slow and deliberate. But he claims, the Kliyakar says, there's something lacking in the explanation. Because where do you have the idea of a step, like ma'alos, going up, ascending the steps, have to do with going slow? So Rashi wants to fix this by explaining. That's what we saw. Rashi says that the steps, meaning going fast. So according to the Kliyakar, he says it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't really fix the problem. Why? Because he claims that when you go up steps, you go slower. It's when you're going down, you go fast. See, okay, because he's just comparing going up and going down. Not that the going up a ramp is slower than the steps. People do the power going up the steps. But do you go up steps quicker or down steps quicker? Down steps quicker. Okay. So now he's playing around with the up and down part. Okay. We're tearing everything apart and building it back up. So he says, it seems that this is what really Rashi is saying. That any judge, kikol dayan she'eno dan b'metun, any judge that doesn't judge slowly and deliberately, it's an aspect of haughtiness. He says, mitzad gasas rucha, an expanded spirit, a coarse spirit. Then what does he want to do? What does he want to do? He wants to show off. He wants to show everybody what an expert he is, and that he knows how to make connections between precedents, previous rulings, and how they can all... So he's trying to show what a genius he is, right? You see these people, they talk a lot. It's better to sometimes silence, basically, he contains all the table of content. He's not willing to look at a book to, humble himself. Maybe he can learn something. He's got it all. Okay? That he's way above any book. So what does it come out? It comes out that he's not slow. He's not being deliberate in judgment. And that is ha'oil b'mala derek gaiva v'go. The word gaiva, haughtiness, is to raise yourself up. Has to do with raising up. That's what he's talking about. Because that's the problem. Raising yourself up in such a fashion. And Rashi says, b'merutza, quickly. So even before he's quick to cut, this is going to be interesting, because the word to cut the sentence, to give the verdict quickly. When you have a knife, it's really sharp. We're going to get into this idea later. Shochad. I'm reading. But anyway, so basically what happens is, in Hebrew, it's really interesting. A Hebrew sentence, why do they call it a sentence? The judge hands down a sentence. He's not handing down a participle and an object and a verb and a period at the end. He's not handing down a sentence. But it's interesting because in Hebrew, the word for a sentence is mishpat. And a mishpat is the sentence that he's handing down. It's like, I don't know if you guys know this, before, when God created the world, he spoke Hebrew, he said, right? I mean, obviously that's hard to understand that he doesn't have a mouth, but the Torah tells us he spoke, and the world came into being. He spoke Hebrew, he looked into the Torah, which is written in Hebrew. Again, what does that mean? But he thinks in Hebrew, he's a Zionist, and he knows Hebrew. So Adam spoke Hebrew to God, and all the generations up until not the flood, the Tower of Babel was it was all one language. It was the Hebrew language, and then the Tower of Babel, meaning the not just dispersion. Where we're talking about the word Babel means not understanding each other, because the word Babel actually means confusion. Right? God brought confusion in the languages, and he created 70 languages and 70 nations, and they were spread throughout the world. So that's when Hebrew was left with just the holy nation. But before that, everyone spoke Hebrew, and many words are actually throughout the many different languages and nations are Hebrew rooted. They're rooted in the Hebrew language. I have a friend. He's a master of Edonics, the language of Eden. Yeah, Isaac Moseson, Davin's next to me every day. He has on his, he wrote a book called The Word. If you ever look it up, The Word. And he brings roots of words through all the different languages throughout the world and how they relate to Hebrew. And he has not just a website, but he has like some kind of what we call search engine, because you can't make a book anymore. It's too big. It's way too big. It's so fascinating. I'll just give you an example. The word couple. In Hebrew, when you want to double something over, lekaper. You want to make another key? You want to make a duplicate? What's it called? The shachper. Mars hamachpelah. There were 4 couples. Anyway, just learning Hebrew is like just fascinating. It brings you back to a source, a higher being, higher sense. But we were talking about going quickly. So in order to show you that what should the judge do, the opposite, look at Psalms. This is number 4, Psalm 75:3. It says, Ki echach moed. Moed means an appointed time, like a festival. The truth is, it just means time itself. Ki echach moed, when I take the time, ani mesharim eshpot, I shall judge with fairness. This is King David. When I take the time, I'm going to have a better judgment. It's going to be truer than if I, try to snap my fingers and show off, and I'm usually going to make a mistake. But if I take my time, I'll have a better chance of being right. And in continuation with the same idea, look at 73:21, Psalm 73:21, that's number 5 on the source sheet. Ki yitchametz levavi. What's chametz? It's when you don't do anything to the water and the flour when they got mixed together. You allow it to ferment, right? Chametz is to do, not act quickly. The opposite of acting quickly. So when my heart ferments, not in the negative sense of chametz on Pesach, but when I allow my heart to really contemplate, klayotai eshtonein, then my mind will be sharpened. Okay, this is King David. What a wonderful person. What a hero. Yeah, he was he's a real hero of ours. And he says, when I allow my heart to ferment, meaning I'm not so quick to act, then my mind becomes sharpened. How are we doing so far? These are like lessons for life, or what? Every day we can implement these things and become better people and bring the world to a higher level.
Yeah, it's good.
Okay, so he said, thank you. So he says, Ki al kol panim, kasha li al Rashi. The Kli Yakar still a little bit bothered. Remember, Rashi didn't bring either one of these two opinions. He only brought the idea that Sanhedrin sits next to the Mizbeach. That's it. Okay, he didn't bring that other part about the Ve'ela. It's true. The only thing he really talked about was the juxtaposition was necessary to teach us that the Sanhedrin, you know who the Sanhedrin is, the 71 members of the High Court. As we know, right, if you have a doubt, you don't know a certain law, it says to go up to the place that God will choose. I think it's a very important verse because it's one of those verses that I think, I'm going to say, proves that there's such a thing as the oral Torah. You want proof there's an oral Torah? The Torah says, the Torah itself says, in your society, when you're not sure of something, go up to Yerushalayim. It doesn't say Yerushalayim. It doesn't say Yerushalayim anywhere in the 5 books of Moses. It says go to the place that God will choose. Okay? And we know where that is. I'm going to find it for you. It is 17, huh? Look in Shoftim, chapter 17 in Deuteronomy, verse 8. If a matter of judgment is hidden from you, between blood and blood, between verdict and verdict, between plague and plague, matters of dispute in your cities. I mean, obviously you go, if you have any question, you go to the court, and the court will make a decision. If the court says, I don't know, that exact circumstance hasn't come to us and we're not qualified, bring it to the next court. So like you have city, state, national. So the same thing with us. We had in each town, and then you had each tribe, and then you had a higher court. So you went to where? Where does it say to go? It says you shall rise up and ascend to the place that Hashem your God shall choose. And what do you do there? You shall come to the Kohanim, the Levites, and to the judge, who will be in those days. That means today. Fortunately, we don't have the temple. So the Sanhedrin is not sitting there. We don't even have the Sanhedrin, but we can discuss how we deal with that today. In the meantime, what do? You inquire, and they will tell you. They're going to actually respond. They're going to tell you, from that place that Hashem will choose, you shall be careful to do everything, to do according to everything they will teach you. You have to follow what they say. Well, I mean, we're talking about a doubt, right? According to the teaching they will teach you, and according to the judgment they will say to you, you shall do. You shall not deviate from the word they will tell you, right or left. It doesn't say go to God, go to meditate in some closet, and whatever God tells you to do, you do. It doesn't say that. It says you got to go to a certain designated place, and we know, at least if we believe here, Mishpatim, it says the Sanhedrin sat next, they sat on the Temple Mount. That's where they were, and that's the high court, and that's where you go. I heard another beautiful thing today. When it says, V'yidaber Hashem el Moshe lemor. You know how many times it says that in the Torah? Quite a lot. There's another proof for the oral Torah. V'yidaber, that's significant of Torah Shebechtav. It's a harsh language. It's language of, this is what God is saying to Moses. But what's lemor? Lemor is to say over. God spoke, so that represents the written Torah, for Moses to say over. And that's a language of Amira. Amira versus Dibur. Dibur is harsh, Amira is soft. I'm not saying that the written Torah is harsh, I'm saying it's like etched in stone. You can't play with it. It is what it is. It's etched in stone, so to speak. Literally. And then you have what we call the more fluid and soft, the oral Torah. That is lemor. So when it says, God spoke to Moses saying, all those times it says it, it's God spoke, that's like directly from God, that's the written Torah, to Moses to tell over. It was obligatory for Moses, the leader, the rabbis, to tell over, and that's the oral Torah. Okay, Back in our text. So, what was bothering him? He says, Manale Rashi, how does Rashi come and say what we just said? All he said was about the Sanhedrin sitting next to the altar. And then he fails to bring the other two opinions. So what did Rashi see to bring such a thing? So now he's going to try to explain. That it seems the best way to explain this is that both Bar Kapara and Rabbi Eliezer, they both thought that perhaps what? That don't ascend the steps, they're not steps, build an altar instead, that the word al, okay, this is going to be a very important lesson to understand the Hebrew language within the Torah, because it may not apply in everyday spoken Hebrew, but it probably does, that the word al means, it could mean actually upon, in other words, one thing upon another, but the word al does not always mean one thing upon another. It could mean next to. And he brings several proof texts. So once you understand that al doesn't have to mean upon, he's telling us what the Pashat Pshat is. Now you know that when it says the word don't go up upon my altar, don't ascend next to my altar. And where's that? That's where the Sanhedrin sits, because the vav and the whole connection here. But he says like this, the word al can mean mamish, actually upon, one on top of another. And that would be the most simplest explanation. But it can also mean next to, etzel. So here's an example. If you look in, and this is number 7, Exodus 20, verse 21. No. Sorry, that's how we're translating it. If you look at Exodus 20, 21, right, and you shall slaughter besides it. First of all, you never slaughter, have a great Shabbos. You never slaughter the animal on the altar. The animal is slaughtered next to the altar. And in which corner is really well described. So we already know from our own verse that it's not on the altar either. But if you go to number 8, Numbers 2, verse 20, next to him, it says, Olav Mate Menashe. So it's describing where the different 12 tribes in the desert, how they were positioned around the Aron HaKodesh, around the Mishkan. You had the 12 tribes, 3 on each side. So where they were positioned. There was no such thing as one tribe on top of another. There was a tribe next to another tribe. Clear as day? So we see the word olav or the word al, meaning it could mean next to. And we know that, like I said already, you don't slaughter on the altar. The slaughter is done next to the altar. So there's an interesting thing, because we're not going to leave the Pashat Pshat. You have Pashat Pshat, meaning the simple meaning, as well as the drasha. So what we're doing is we're taking what we learned below, above, because of the vav. So the word etzel, we're by, next to, we're also going to learn upon in both ways. It's like, in other words, there's a way to learn both. So now we know, it says, Eila HaMishpatim. These are the laws you should place before them. It has a vav. The vav is in ituf. Ituf means totally encompassing, both sides. Whatever applies to here, applies to there. Whatever applies to there, applies to here. So what do we hear? That just like above, you're supposed to place the chok and the mishpat to the judges, meaning above. Just like after the words, ve'ela mishpatim, it says you shall place before them. You're supposed to, the judges have to keep the law. They're not above the law. Mm-hmm. Have you ever heard such a thing? I think there's a controversy in America. They have this problem. You know what I'm talking about, right? There's certain people, like the Clintons, they're above the law, right? There's certain people that are above the law. They're not supposed to be. Anyway, judges are not above the law. So just like you have to give the judges the law, they have to apply it, right? To teach them that's how they have to behave. So too, now we understand when it says ve'ela, it's going to apply backwards also. Shenosav al chok hamishma, shenosav lemala Tasim lifneim gam elu mishpatim. Okay. And if that's the case, he says there's still difficulty. Because we're Heichan diber lamala min chukei hadayanim. He's not sure what does it mean. Where do you understand above that we're talking about the laws of the judges? So he says absolute with certainty that we learn that because the Sanhedrin sits next to the altar. And now we're going to get into this whole idea. What is it about the altar? What is the altar? We bring our sacrifices. Why is it called a altar of earth? Why is it an altar of earth? What's the name for man? Adam. Where do we come from? We come from the soil. The soil is very low, a low substance, right? It's heavy and it's low. Does God want our sacrifices? No. What does he want? What does God want? He doesn't want our sacrifices. So now in the last paragraph on this page, the mashma'ut, the inferences of the argument between Bar Kapara and Rabbi Eliezer, as we already mentioned, right? The opinion of Rabbi Bar Kapara was to explain the verse in its most simplest, in expounded fashion, which means he's adding upon what is the simple explanation. And what was that? That they are sitting by the Mizbeach. In other words, when he says you should be slow in judgment, it's because they're sitting there. He's adding on. We already know the Pshat, according to Rashi, is that the Sanhedrin is sitting next to the altar. So he's adding this idea by those who are sitting next to the altar, they shouldn't be marutza, they shouldn't run, meaning they should be matuning bedin, they should judge slowly, not in the way of haughtiness. And after the fact that you are sitting now by the altar, what does the altar represent? This is it, drum roll please. The altar represents Hamayr Kulu Al Geder Anava. It teaches about humility. The altar teaches you about humility because it is made from the earth. And the earth, not only that, it's also called God's altar. From the aspect that it's called God's altar, what does God want? Look in Tehillim, Nun, it's 51. Look at number 9. The sacrifices of God are what? What are the sacrifices of God? A broken heart. A what? Ruach nishbara. A broken spirit. You will not despise a broken and crushed heart. God will not turn away. It's two things. It's a ruach nishbara, lev nishbar, v'nitche elokim lo tivzeh. God will not despise, push away, degrade. He will uplift. Mm-hmm. We have to come to Hashem with our broken hearts, with our open hearts, with our honest hearts. So apparently, according to Bar Kapara, this is a drush. But it's all based on the idea the Sanhedrin is sitting there. Okay. Perhaps it's not exactly the same concept, but it's still there. And according to Rabbi Eliezer, he explains in a way, let me have to read, where the drasha and the pshat are one. So apparently, according to Bar Kapara, they're a little bit different. According to Rabbi Eliezer, they're the same. Meaning like this. What is the accomplishment? What does the Torah want to, according to Rabbi Eliezer, what does the Torah want to accomplish? It wants to warn the Dayan, to warn the judge who's sitting by the Mizbeach, what? Not to tread on the heads of the holy people. Right? Lo ta'aleh b'malos, don't go up these steps. Kisham Moshav HaSanhedrin, because that's where the Sanhedrin is sitting. Va'ola shama b'malos, and when you go up there, if you would go up in steps, then it would look like you're walking on their heads. If they're sitting in close proximity, and let's say you're standing on the other side of the room, what do you see with your own eyes? People walking up a ramp. it looks like they're walking literally on their heads. Because they're sitting in a horseshoe fashion on the floor, on the Temple Mount. Right? You've seen the movies, now try to imagine it, the real thing. Hopefully one day we'll have it.
Amen.
And someone's walking up the ramp, it looks like they're walking on their heads. It's like an illusion, like perception. He's using the literal perception to explain that that's wrong, meaning that the Sanhedrin, the judges, should not walk on everyone else's head because of the juxtaposition of what we had before and what we have after. So he also learns it, I think, as a Kabbalah Chomer. Let me just see what he says here. Just want to get to like the middle of the paragraph. He says like this. I think I have to start. Ki al pshuto kasha. Ki al rosh dafka al psi. It's really upon their heads. You shouldn't walk. Ki al gufo muter. So it's like a question. What? Only on their heads you're not supposed to walk, but on their bodies you can walk? That doesn't make sense. So what does it mean on their heads? Meaning on their heads of the holy people. And without that vav, what would I have thought? I would have thought, don't go up steps. And it's ein bo ki pshuto, that it's only the simple explanation. No. Also, the ki lo ratza mikra lismoch al kaver chomer shezachar Rashi. I'm not sure. He says the im kain minayin ledayin lo yapsia, and that's from the kaver chomer. Ein lilmod kiin b'sharadam. That's what we pretty much said before. You might have thought that only applies to either Kohen or other people, but when it came to the Dayan, you might think, the judge, you might think, no, he should put himself way above. That's why the Torah is telling us, no. It comes and gives us this limud, this extra learning, that the Sanhedrin is not above anybody. They want respect. They have to earn it in order to be admitted onto the Sanhedrin. They have to be of perfect character, and it's not by popularity vote. It's not how much money they have. It's not how many previous ancestors they had as judges in their family. It's based on their abilities and their character. Okay, now we're going to finish it off a little bit with this idea of what does bribery do? This is also like a warning, because we're going to see right away, there's all these laws, how judges should act, and they shouldn't take bribes. A bribe, you call the money the bribe. The person's not the bribe, it's the money. And what happens? Let's say you're the judge, and I meet you, and I'm going to, I'm going to bribe you, right? I'm going to act as a bribe, I'm going to give you money. Do you know how you're going to judge? Of course you do. The moment you take the money, you already know the outcome. So that's the opposite of judging fairly, and it's the opposite of judging slowly. That one should not, there's a warning to the judges, don't cut the din, don't mete out the sentence, don't cut the verdict quickly from the aspect of receiving any kind of bribe. The actual word shochad for bribe, is from a concept of shehu chad, that he's sharp. Meaning to say, ki hanotnu umekablu nasu chad. That the one who gives the bribe and the one who receives the bribe, they have one mind and one mindset only. They're like one person. Ein hadat nocha b'ferish zeh ki milat shochad. Shochad is going on the money, not on the person. So he says it's a lashon chidud. Shachad, shu chad. Chad means sharp. Like in number, just the proof text, Proverbs 27:17, verse 10 is 10 in the source sheet. Proverbs 27:17. It just shows you the word chad. Yachad means sharp. Like when you sharpen a knife, it comes down to 1 point. So even the word echad means one, chad can mean one, but it means sharp. That when you bring that to a point, it's a very sharp, singular point. So he says, when that's sharp, what happens? You cut quickly, right? If you ever notice, you want to cut something, if you have a dull knife, it could take you forever, right? You don't cut a steak with a butter knife, right? It'll take you forever. It depends how tender the steak is, but the idea is the sharper the knife, the quicker it's cut. So this whole idea is that when you take the shochad, the mishpat is already cut. It's already been determined quickly who the winner is, based on who gave you the most amount of money. You had a question? Yeah.
Yeah. On the law that says do not accept a bribe, for the bribe will blind those who see and corrupt words that are just.
Yeah.
23:8. I'm wondering, it's interesting to me that it doesn't say do not give a bribe, do not offer a bribe. It says do not accept a bribe.
Because this is to the judges.
This is to the judges.
This is the whole idea here. That's why we're trying to say there's also connection. If you notice, the laws are directed. This is the Eile Mishpatim. These are the judgments. What that you shall place before them. Who's them?
It's
the judges.
So you're saying these laws just apply
no,
to judges?
Of course not. We're all judges. Every day I judge everything in my life. I judge you by the questions you just asked. I judge you by the clothes you wear. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. We're constantly judging. So whatever applies to the judges applies to us as well on some level. Okay?
That's interesting. Okay, thank you.
So he says, I got lost here. So we last ended with this verse in Proverbs, Ki kol gamar din nikra b'lashon chachamim chochech hadin. So when you give the verdict, it's called meting out the verdict, meting it out, cutting it. It's in Hebrew, cutting out the judgment, and someone who is slow in judgment, so he's not cutting quickly. He's not cutting it quickly. He says it's similar to someone who cuts with a knife that's not so sharp. So that is not going to cut quickly. But when you when the judge receives something in return, right, whether it's money, so then he immediately makes, it's as if he's using a sharp knife, and he's cutting the din quickly, and there's no need for him to be so matun b'din. In other words, he himself knows that the longer he draws it out, it's not so good. He's already made a decision, which is based on bribery. He doesn't need any more clarification because he's clear how much he received and who gave it and which way he's going to announce the verdict. He's already concluded in his own mind who is right based on what was given to him. That's why we call the money shochad, because it's chad, because it's sharp. And he uses the word mammon muchudad v'choyte chadid mehera. It's the money. It's not the person. It's the money that was sharp and caused the judgment to come so quickly, right? And to be on the side.
Horrible.
Okay. There's this last important point I want to talk about. It's a Pirkei Avot. It says that the money is called shochad, as we said, shuhuchad. As Chazal say, if you look in Pirkei Avot 5:11, it's the last thing on our sheet, number 11. The sword comes to the world, cherev bo la'olam, meaning destruction. Destruction comes to the world. Al inoi hadin. Inoi, that means the oppression of the judgment. Meaning, if the person is innocent and you don't tell him he's innocent today, you wait. That's called oppression of judgment. And the corruption of judgment, evil din, not being straight. That's shochad. That's the corruption. And because of those who misinterpret the Torah. So destruction, bad things come to the world on account of these three things. We just learned about two of them. One is the person who's righteous, you should let them go free immediately. If they're guilty, you should wait. Okay? Don't take bribery push him, out, quit him, give the fair judgment, but do it deliberately and patiently. And this is, hopefully I'm doing this right. And because of those who misinterpret the Torah, hopefully I won't be misinterpreting the Torah. I think you all agree that whatever I said, you were already taught in your mother's womb. It all resonates and sits well. And you can see now in the Torah itself, because does this really make sense when you go back, right? An altar of earth you shall make for me. You're making for God something, an altar which is made out of earth, which is very lowly and, full of humility. You slaughter near it, not upon it. It has to be slaughtered next to it. So we already know now we're talking about something that is next to it. And this is a beautiful, besides the different kinds of offerings, God says, wherever I permit my name to be mentioned, we know where that is. Okay, that is in the temple, where we mention his name. And I shall come to you and bless you. And when you make for me an altar of stones, don't build them hewn, don't take metal. This is an inanimate object. It doesn't feel anything, but don't bring any, because it's somehow we are atoned for sins that have to do with violence. Okay? You don't bring, today in our Beit Knesset, in our shuls, we don't bring guns, we don't bring weapons. Now today, because we have security issues, it is permissible, but it should be covered. It should be covered.
Interesting.
You don't bring weapons of destruction to a place where you find life, where you find extended life. This is where, and you don't ascend my altar. It's called God's altar on steps, so that your nakedness will not be uncovered upon it. What is it talking about? There's really, the stones have feelings. So it's the idea that it's a kal v'chomer, it's a priori argument, meaning a logical conclusion, that if the stones are shamed by your nakedness, how much more so you're not allowed to shame, degrade other people. We have the vav, and these are your ordinances. The vav took and connected both sides, because what you would have thought it was just the Kohanim or a regular person that couldn't degrade other people. Well, we already know going up means going quickly, so even the judge has to go slow, but other people as well. You might have thought that the judge should instill some kind of fear and be, let's say, nasty or mean or whatever. I don't know exactly what he has to do that. But no, he's not. He has to keep the Torah, and he has to walk in the Torah just like everyone else. And his merit or honor is earned by his actions, not by his robe or the length of his robe. And these are the ordinances you should place before them. All the laws we're about to hear are not just for judges, but mainly for judges. Okay?
So interesting.
So we accomplished a lot in a short period of time. I'm open for questions. I want to hear questions. I want to argue with me, say it doesn't make sense. Can't be. Have a good Shabbos.
Shama shir shir